and speech and belief, freedom of assembly, freedom of the media, etc., etc. The very typical freedoms that you'd expect from a Western nation are in the Charter. However, in the Charter, there is Section 33, which is essentially dubbed the Notwithstanding Clause. What it essentially does is gives the federal or provincial powers to override anything in the most important sections of the Charter whenever it becomes inconvenient for them to, be legal. So, it seems like a pretty improbable possibility that this would ever come to use because, well, quite simply, it's offensive. But it actually has been used, most famously in the late 80s when the Quebec government instituted a sign law that stated that every single sign in Quebec must have French as the predominant language. You could have, for example, Didier's Deutschschule would have to be École Allemande à Didier, okay? For example. And that is in the law. The law gives the government the right to override anything in the Charter when it deals to equality, search and seizure, etc., etc., whenever it's inconvenient, and the only stipulation is that it must be written into a law and that it must be subject to review every 5 years. They can do whatever they want. Alberta has recently instituted Bill C-63, which passed, which can essentially limit the employment possibilities for gay and minority teachers simply because parents have the right to pull their kids out of class, notwithstanding the Charter. Gotcha? You get it? Interesting, eh? So, recently, the BC provincial government, with the Olympics coming up and what have you, has decided to do their own bastardization of freedom. The new law states that if you broadcast or even make a sign or a handout of anything critical of the Olympics, you can be subject to have your premises searched without any other due cause. Okay? You are not allowed to freely speak against the Olympic Games. For example, if you are pissed off the fact that over 70,000 poor people were displaced for the Olympics, if you believe that the Olympics are on misappropriated Aboriginal land, or if you simply believe that the Olympics suck, you can be subject to police search and seizure of anything that they find objectionable. This is a complete bastardization of human rights, and the government knows it, and because Canada has this law that is unlike any other law in the world, they are allowed to do it, and we are not allowed to do anything about it, because the government can also arrest you for protesting. Okay? Now, I know that a lot of other countries are looking at this law and rubbing their hands, because it gives them the absolute power to override the law without even a popular vote to do so. Okay? Israel has adopted certain ideals of the Notwithstanding Clause as of 1992, and the U.S. is looking into it in several of their state jurisdictions. Now, the thing is I could technically, even for having those signs, be subject to search and seizure once this gets really up and kicking. The Olympic bylaw could affect me if I don't erase this video. You know what? Fuck you. I have the right to freely speak my opinion, or even freely speak someone else's opinion I do not believe, because I am a Canadian. Okay? And if you think that you can override the law continuously, you're sadly mistaken. Canadians will wise up to this. Canadians are beginning to wise up to this, and we are fucking pissed off. We just can't understand how a federal entity would write something into a law essentially saying this law doesn't really apply. And I was kind of ranting about this last night, and someone said, oh, Stephen Harper, this, that, and the other thing. Actually, the original notwithstanding clause was put into law by the previous Liberal Party of the 1970s, and the 1982 law was signed by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was a member of the Liberal Party. And Gordon Campbell, the Premier of BC, who is enacting this retarded exclusion, is a member of the Liberal Party. It's not Stephen Harper's fault. Okay, Stephen Harper, I might not agree with a lot of his personal opinions, but he at least attempts to reflect the populace in what he says to the public. He makes a stab at it. He doesn't stab you in the back. And if you are subject to any of these Olympic laws, I implore you, if you suspect that you are going to be searched, that you find dirty sex toy samples from all of the displaced HIV-infected crack whores that are now infesting your neighborhoods because the government of BC wanted them out of Vancouver. I think that would be a pretty specific fucking deterrent.